you all so much for joining in on this call. So we're really just here to discuss partnerships between town campaigns and local fair trade retailers. So we've seen a lot of success with campaigns being run out of a fair trade retail store. So we just wanted to kind of share the knowledge and see if maybe it's something that could benefit you in your town campaign. And we've got two really awesome speakers today, Alissa and Cassidy. Sorry, I didn't have you introduce yourselves because we'll do a little more in-depth introduction for you all. But we're hoping that this call will leave you with some tools and skills to engage your local retailers as partners for your campaign. So without further ado, I will go ahead and introduce our first speaker, Alissa. Alissa Head is the Executive Director of Global Gifts, a nonprofit fair trade organization. She started Fair Trade Columbus in 2015 when she was a Global Gifts store manager in Columbus, Ohio. And she is also currently working on the Fair Trade Indianapolis campaign. So Alissa, go ahead and give us all of your fair trade town knowledge. We're excited to hear from you.
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay? Is it okay if I share my screen?
Yeah, that would be excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. I think this is the right one. All right. Can everybody see that? Yes?
Yep, looks good.
Buttons. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for having me on the call. I'm going to share a little bit about what's worked and what hasn't really worked with Fair Trade Columbus, and kind of talk about some of the things we've done. I do think that every campaign is going to be a little different, and your partners are going to probably be a little different. And then this was a great opportunity for me because when I became Executive Director of Global Gifts, I passed on the Fair Trade Columbus mantle to Bradley, who is going to help us finish up with the, not only with the proclamation, but hopefully will be incorporating as a nonprofit, getting some bylaws in place and becoming more, as he said, for sustainable growth of the movement locally in Columbus. So I got to boil a lot of this down in thinking about my approach to Fair Trade Indianapolis. So that was really great. All right, so we actually have 4 stores. I'm sorry, can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we have 4 stores. We've got 3 in Indiana and 1 in Columbus, Ohio. When I was hired to open the Columbus, Ohio store, I started Fair Trade Columbus because fair trade outreach was part of my job description, and I didn't really have a background in fair trade. And I felt like the campaign really provided a built-in structure for me, as well as promoting fair trade locally. So really helped me learn about how fair trade works. And I did see that one of our store managers in Bloomington, he was part of the Fair Trade Bloomington campaign too. So I was sort of introduced to the movement through him. So I was really fortunate in Columbus to have people locally already working in fair trade. We had Global Gallery, which is a fair trade coffee shop and retailer, and World Pieces, which is a fair trade wholesale company. And one of the person who owns World Pieces, she was on the board of Global Gallery, and she also she doesn't teach anymore, but she used to teach at Ohio State University, and she taught about fair trade with OSU. So I was really fortunate to have them already in the community. I reached out to them and asked them to form a committee with me for the campaign. I promised them they wouldn't have to do any legwork. It's like, I'll do all the legwork, but I need your input and I need your advice. So I think starting with businesses who already have a stake in how fair trade is promoted locally is a great way to get started. Although I didn't really realize the potential I had there until I would say just the last couple of years. So at first, I really just focused on completing the steps, and I worked with interns from Ohio State University, which was already a fair trade campus. Although they're not really active right now, I felt like there was some good outreach there. And the interns did most of the legwork although I did do my fair share. So we're hoping to rejuvenate OSU as a fair trade campus. We're trying to get someone who is a long-term stakeholder, like maybe a faculty or staff member at OSU, to keep that going. So creating a community of stakeholders, and this is the potential to which I was referring earlier. So we had the stakeholders, but it took me a little while to understand how to really get the community off of the ground. Starting with businesses that are committed to fair trade principles. They already have a reason to support the campaign, which is promotion of fair trade, and their businesses locally. So I would encourage interns to promote any of our retailers on our social media accounts, especially if they were making posts that were focused on fair trade products, to make that part of the, the desire to be part of Fair Trade Columbus. Like, you're on our retailer list and we're going to share posts that you share about fair trade. But I also encourage them to share any posts by our local retailers that were fully committed to fair trade. And so that was just sort of a starting point for us with social media. And then we started having regular, I wouldn't say that we had regular committee meetings until just the last couple of years. And I think that made a big difference too. So at first we started doing events at our own locations, like Global Gifts had their own World Fair Trade Day event and Global Gallery had their own event. And then as we started having meetings, we thought, well, let's try to hold our own World Fair Trade Day event together. And while it was a really great event and it was a lot of fun, it was basically just us shopping from each other and drinking fair trade wine and listening to music. So it was fun and it was great, but it was not really what we were hoping for in terms of outreach. So I was having lunch one time with a colleague who, and I think this was right after I became executive director, so May of last year, and she coordinates the biggest craft show in town in Columbus called Craft and Outlaws. And I knew her from my days in the DIY community because I used to vend at this event myself. And it just, I don't know, occurred to me in the moment to ask her if she would be interested in having a Fair Trade Columbus section at Craft and Outlaws. And she said yes, and it was a big success for the campaign and for the stakeholders. We had 5 fair trade retailers there, and it led us to start partnering with other community events like local farmers markets, and we had a film screening at a local nonprofit film center. So we've just been able to be present at more events in the community. And I just think I hadn't really thought about partnering with events that are already successful and already happening. And I think that made a big difference for us. That's an ongoing relationship. So now we're at every Craft and Outlaws, and it's twice a year. So it's really, really great. So we got some surprising results from that too. They started sharing some of our fair trade retailers or organizations or products. And this product is actually made locally by a nonprofit group called Women Crafting Change. And it's disadvantaged women artisans locally, and they use fair trade shea butter chips. So it was a really fun partnership, and it was just fun to see this take off, and it was really successful for this particular retailer. So we'll be present again at the holiday show this year, and they're already asking us for more information about our vendors so they can get it out there. And they have a huge following, not just locally, but in the Midwest. So we're really excited about that. So as I started thinking about how to boil what I've learned down for Fair Trade Indianapolis, I have this to-do list. One, obviously I got to make some buttons, because buttons is what I made a lot of buttons for Fair Trade Columbus, and apparently that's a big deal. It really helps. We're planning to use social media in Indianapolis to promote our campaign and our retailers list like we did in Columbus. We need to begin our outreach to build our community organizations list, because we have all of our retailers fulfilled. I actually think this is going to be more successful in Indy, because I think we have a lot more churches with social justice projects than we do in Columbus. We're going to work to connect with other fair trade businesses who will join with us to create that small but fierce community of stakeholders. So I looked over our retailers list in Indy, and there aren't any other retailers that are fully committed to fair trade principles. They just have 2 products or more. So that's actually going to be more challenging in Indianapolis. I'm sure that those stakeholders are there, but we're going to have to do some work, maybe with the Indy Chamber, maybe with, we might actually have more success working with churches there, or even the universities, because Butler University is a fair trade university. So we're going to shamelessly piggyback on existing events. So there's an event that is held in Indy called the Fair Trade Fair at the I think it's Union Chapel Methodist Church, and they started this fair last year. And Global Gifts, then we were a vendor at this fair. And so this year I've asked if we can also have a Fair Trade Indianapolis table, and we can do more outreach like that. There'll be vendors there that will already be interested in fair trade. They might be a good fit for our community of stakeholders. So that's something that we're going to look into to help get this campaign in Indy really going. So that's what I think is my biggest takeaway, is use your existing connections to further your outreach. For example, Global Gifts, we have a contact at the mayor's office in Indy. So obviously that's like a natural fit for us just to use that contact for Fair Trade Indianapolis. It's just something that I hadn't really thought about for Fair Trade Columbus until later. And when I started just utilizing my existing contacts, even though they maybe weren't the perfect fit for fair trade, but they were doing things that were similar, like local artisan made goods and things like that, that's when things really started to take off for us. So I think that's really all I got today. And share.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving us that very specific list of kind of action items that you have. I think that's super helpful, especially for brand new campaigns. You know, it can kind of feel overwhelming, and you know, you don't really know where to start. So thank you so much, especially for sharing that bit of knowledge.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that it was so overwhelming at first. I really just focused on the steps, and that was fine. But there's more that you can do if you're thinking about your contacts in the community and what you can do with them and how you can partner.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I'm sure people have questions. We're gonna have one more speaker and then and hold those until the end. So I'll go ahead and introduce our next speaker, Cassidy Bell. And she is the manager of 10,000 Villages in Iowa City. She spearheaded the Fair Trade Iowa City campaign in 2016 and has transitioned into a more supportive role on the steering committee for the town campaign and an advisory role for the Fair Trade University campaign. She's grateful to be part of a dynamic campaign group that is as passionate about fair trade as she is. So let's go ahead and give our attention to Cassidy. We look forward to hearing from you.
Hi, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, I do not have a presentation, so feel free to minimize me so you're not just staring at my face, but I am so glad to be part of this, and that was a lot of great information. I took a bunch of notes, so thank you so much, Alissa, for what you shared too. So yeah, like Taryn said, I'm the manager of 10,000 Villages here in Iowa City, and I wanted to give you a little bit of background about 10,000 Villages for those of you that aren't familiar. And then I'll tell you a little bit about our store and about our campaign here in Iowa City. So 10,000 Villages has a really amazing origin story. It was founded in 1946 by a Mennonite woman, and she began by traveling with the Mennonite Central Committee with her husband. And her first trip went to Puerto Rico, where she noticed that there were a lot of women making beautiful handcrafted items, but they had no market to sell these pieces to. So she decided to buy them and bring them home and sell them to her girlfriends out of the trunk of her car. And what started in the trunk of her car quickly moved to her basement, which moved to festival sales, which in turn moved to a brick and mortar that opened in the 60s. And that first brick and mortar coincided with the beginning of the World Fair Trade Organization. And so it's really exciting that 10,000 Villages got to be part of things from that very beginning, and had a hand in creating the tenets of fair trade and then threading those directly through the organization. So our mission is to create opportunities for artisans in developing countries to earn income by bringing their products and their stories through our markets through fair trading, long-lasting relationships. And we envision a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. And in Iowa City, that story also began in the 60s when we began doing festival sales at a couple churches. Flash forward 20 years, the store opened, but it was only open for about a decade before rent got a little bit too high in the downtown area and it closed. And so back in 2008, a group of activists began working together to bring in 10,000 villages to Iowa City. And so that's where the focus of our energy has been in bringing a store to our community. We just opened in 2016, so we're only 3 years old right now. The group started in 2008, the financial crisis hit, and everything got put on hold. They pushed it back to 2014, where they opened a pop-up shop, so it was similar to the festival sales, where we had products for 6 weeks, and were run completely on volunteers. And we raised $60,000, so it was enough to show that our community was interested and engaged and supportive of a fair trade retailer. We did it again and had a big fundraising push and ended up being able to open in September of 2016. I was brought in August of that year, so I've got to be part of the store of our official brick and mortar location since we opened. And the Fair Trade campaign got started kind of right away after we opened. So we are a university town as well. University of Iowa is not currently a fair trade university, but there is a fair trade campaign that has been started. And I worked on the preliminary fair trade campaign for the university when I was a student here back in 2009. So I'm familiar with the campaign just from that background. But I wanted to do the Fair Trade Town campaign when I started at 10,000 Villages. We didn't have, I was, I guess, unsure about how to go about it as the manager. Like in Indianapolis, we don't have a lot of stores that are dedicated to fair trade except for 10,000 Villages. We have a number of stores around the downtown area that sell fair trade products, one or two, or here and there. It's just not, there's not a dedicated group, I guess, of individuals. And I was worried that if I started the campaign as the manager of a fair trade store by myself, it would seem a little bit self-serving, I guess, and I didn't, or maybe not self-serving, but I didn't know where it would lead. So I really wanted to get buy-in from other community members and make sure that we had stakeholders that were more than just me, so that there was buy-in from everybody and a team that was strong and stable. So I guess the university again kind of came into play. I had a student walk in probably about a month after we opened, and he quizzed me pretty hard on fair trade and what we did. And it turned out that he had needed to do a project for a semester for grad school, and decided to start the campaign for Iowa City through that project. And so he did a lot of those checking off the list of marking stores that sell fair trade items and finding organizations that use fair trade goods and getting us started that way. And then he graduated, which is a common problem with university students. We have great enthusiasm, idealistic, so excited to help, and then their jobs change or their class schedule changes or they graduate, and so we lose them. And so there's been a lot of transition in the 3 years that we've been operating. And we kind of just had some time where we didn't get a lot done. But we currently have a really strong team. Zach, who's on the call, has been leading us right now, also a Fair Trade Fellow. And we have a group of about 5 people that are really invested. And so I think expanding our reach has really helped. And I feel like the perspective of the store that has been the most effective is just having that consistency. So as our group has changed, it's just been 3 years, but as our steering committee has changed over that time, the store has been a good focal point to meet people. And when people come into the store that are really interested and don't have time to volunteer for us, it's a great way to channel their energy and find a fit for them in the campaign. So I would say that the best way to utilize your fair trade retailer is to make sure that they're on your team. First of all, they're a great asset to have. They'll be your best ally, a huge advocate. They are probably really busy. There's a lot that it takes to run a fair trade retailer. But most of the managers that I know have a million great ideas of events and promotions and ways to get your campaign out there. And so they make great sounding boards. They're probably happy to get coffee with you on a monthly basis or quarterly, attend steering committee meetings. I think the best way to involve them is you don't have to tell them that there is nothing that you need from them, but maybe just be specific with your asks. So if there is something that you need for a certain event, or you need flyers printed, or you want them to send out an email to their customer base or their volunteer base, you can always post flyers at their stores, table, and just use them as your living room, because they are completely invested in your message, and their mission lines up with yours. And so the more we can partner together, the better for all of us. And yeah, I think that's about all that I have to say. I'm trying to read my notes and see if there was anything else I added, but I am happy to answer any questions that you guys have from that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cassidy.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and open the floor for questions. We've got about 30 minutes, actually. So hopefully we can get some good conversations out of these questions. So whoever's got one, go ahead.
This is Joan in LA, and I don't have a question, but I just really want to support what Cassidy was saying, because when we started, just a few of us around my kitchen table kind of talking about who else out there cares about fair trade. And this was before the whole campaign possibility came into view. That this was like, say, 14 years ago, and it was just not on our radar. And at the same time, Pasadena was opening up a 10,000 Villages store. And so we, and again, we called ourselves Fair Trade LA, not thinking of LA as a campaign or anything, but just because LA is so big, why not? But we really worked with them and utilized them and supported them, because it was so fantastic to have a full fair trade store, in the area. And we wanted to do everything we could to support them and grow the awareness of fair trade, which again eventually led to actually having Pasadena become a fair trade town. But the idea that they were there and we met there, and their staff, Sam Bills was the manager at the time, and was so supportive, and that was a way to really get people into the store as you're out talking to people and touch and feel and hear the stories and really make something concrete, because it's a great concept and it's how we buy and how we shop, but it's a great way for people to walk in a door and be overwhelmed by how wonderful the place is. We have subsequently opened up a second one, not we, I mean people, in Redondo Beach that's also equally successful. But they're really key to, like I say, they housed us for meetings for some of the things we were doing in Pasadena, and just really critical in being able to say, hey, go to this store and see the stuff and see, especially back then, because it was so little available elsewhere. But we still would want full support for them. So I'm just grateful that they're in the neighborhood.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I kind of just want to go off of what you were saying and let anybody on the call know who's maybe starting a campaign or feeling like their campaign needs a little bit of reviving. At Fair Trade Campaigns, we've really talked to some really strong towns campaigns, and a lot of them are willing to mentor kind of startup campaigns. So if you think that being mentored by another campaign would be helpful, or if you don't have another campaign close by you, or you're feeling like you don't have a ton of support from your community or whatever it may be, definitely reach out to Fair Trade Campaigns, to one of the fellows in your region, or even just the contact page on Fair Trade Campaigns. I know that's monitored really well. Definitely reach out, and we can maybe get you another partner in the process. So yeah, thank you for putting that in on the chat. There's a contact us link right there for you all. So anybody else have another question for either of our speakers, or to open up to the group?
This is Kylie. I have a question for both speakers. So first of all, thank you so much. It was really wonderful hearing those insights. And I know, just to echo Taryn, this is something that working with so many of our town campaigns, a lot of folks are really hungry for. And so I'm glad we're having the discussion. Cassidy, you had mentioned students graduating. It's something that we know to be very true here at Fair Trade Campaigns, the loss of momentum with campaigns. And I'm wondering, for both you and Alissa, how have, and maybe it hasn't, but how students played a role as volunteers and having that kind of be a bridge between the campaign and the retailer space? Have you found that that's been a helpful way to maybe keep folks engaged post-grad? And what has been your approach to, where possible, keeping folks engaged, students that graduate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're only 3 years old, our store. Alissa, you might be able to speak to this better. So we're kind of just hitting the point where a lot of our early volunteers are getting ready to graduate. I hope that the campaign is a good way to keep them involved in both the store and the campaign. That would be wonderful. I do think it's a really good transition. So I've noticed that sometimes people are really excited about fair trade and they come to the store and they want to be a volunteer for us at the store. But find that maybe working in the store is just not the right fit for them. And so they are able to plug in better through the campaign. Either they need more flexibility with time, or they are not as social, or, there's just different ways, I guess, that they fit in better. So it's nice to have both of those options as ways that you can either volunteer your time at the store or you can work on the campaign, and vice versa. I think we've had people that have learned about the campaign and then became more interested in the store through that, or learned about the store through the campaign. So yeah, it's a great way to raise awareness of both of them.
So at Global Gifts and for Fair Trade Columbus, we keep our volunteers and our interns separate. It helps us manage a really good internship program where we make sure that their educational needs are being met. So some of our interns, like the interns for Fair Trade Columbus, but we also have other internships. We're a nonprofit too. Some of them go on to be volunteers in the store, which is nice. I would say the majority don't. The majority graduate and move on. I think that's why the Fair Trade Ohio State campaign fizzled, because it was mostly student run and they didn't have someone on faculty or staff there keeping the momentum going for that. I have seen most of the people who stay involved in the campaign have some sort of stake, like they're working for a fair or they start their own fair trade businesses. I've seen this happen too, which I think is great, and that's just a great way to be involved. So here's someone, Emily Marshall. She worked on Fair Trade Ohio State. She worked at Global Gifts. Now she works at Global Gallery, and she started her own fair trade retail company called Shop Ellery. So people like that are invaluable. But I would say that most of our long-term volunteers, while we do have some students stay on, most of them are long-term volunteers. It's totally different from the internship program. So no, I haven't really found that students stay on. So we keep, like, that's why we have two separate programs.
Hi, this is Teresa. I was wondering if it's maybe to describe me for Fair Trade Long Beach actually marrying the town campaign to the retail collective. Is anybody interested in that? Because I'm so excited with what we accomplished. So just basic background. Okay, so I actually helped open the Pasadena store 13 years ago, the 10,000 Villages. And then I went on a journey where I continued my education. I ended up in New York, became part of the New York Fair Trade Coalition, was 6 years with Handcrafting Justice, publicity coordinator, and then 1 year in limbo at Alexandria 10,000 Villages on that steering committee that helped them get fair trade status. Then I prayed my way back to Pasadena and eventually fell in love with Long Beach. I've been on the fair trade campaigns leadership team for the Southwest region for 3 years because I just feel a connection with the accomplishments of this group. So when it came time about a few months ago, we're an active campaign, and we've only been active for about a year. I founded it through the Fair Trade campaign about a year ago. But we have a great community participation. We have about 25 members, and some of them doing fair trade here in Long Beach. So it was natural when this storefront came available, this brick and mortar at the Parkview Village shops, to join us all together. So now we're a collection of 21 partners, that we call it, each sharing rent at this brick and mortar, 1,300 square feet, with an upstairs in the Parkview Village shops with families that come shopping here. There's dance and martial arts. We're a beautiful park area. I just want to, tell you, if you're part of a town campaign, if you can organize that energy where there's not like another fair trade store where you'd be competing with, we considered bringing 10,000 villages to Long Beach. It almost happened at a different shopping area, and then the economy went kind of kaput for that area. So this one, it just aligned with the stars for us to come together more as a collective. Each person has their own 5x5 spot, and we share the rent evenly. We're very solvent in our first 3 months. I never thought I would enjoy doing banking, and I'm like, wow, cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. The community loves us. One thing we've done, we do have Cal State students coming to pick up pamphlets from us to learn how to start their campaign. The Long Beach Community College, the anthropology department has come here and gotten a lot of what they consider fair trade artifacts. Their students found us, told them about it. They want to teach their students fair trade, and so they're going to create a display case in the hallway of their anthropology department. The South Coast Interfaith Council brought us on board. They have on their team for the South Coast Interfaith Council, they would deal with issues of the environment, human trafficking, and foster homes, and so they added fair trade. So now we have the support, and we're always at their General Assembly. So I just wanted to share the enthusiasm. Eldana's on this call. She's one of our partners. She's in the process of getting her Fair Trade Federation designation with her group called Baskets and Beads. So yay to everybody for everything everybody does. But if you're on a town campaign where there's not a competitive store, consider our model, because it's just fantastic.
That's so exciting. I love hearing that story. And I have one thought and one question. One thought is I often think about what Chris Salt said from Fair Trade Federation about co-opetition, because I feel like, the Fair Trade Federation retailers are in co-opetition, and I feel like Fair Trade Columbus retailers are in co-opetition. We work together. When we vend at an event, for example, Global Gallery doesn't have a lot of products. So for the holidays, they bring nothing but woolens, and we don't bring woolens, because we want them to have the woolens. We've got other stuff we can bring. So it's definitely a co-opetition.
Yeah, I agree with that. Co-opetition, I like that term. In fact, this location where we are it was a former socially conscious store called Miamo. And in a sense, I didn't think I would ever want to open the retail collective to compete with Miamo, but I feel, moved to a better location. And when we came in, how could we not open up in a former socially conscious gift store? Yeah. Like I said, the stars aligned. So now Kyle is in Los Alamitos at a beautiful new location. And so he feels good about sending people to us and vice versa. I see how we support each other here. So, and then we had, what's the name of it? We had Share and Do Good. But Long Beach is so big that I think that we are bringing this to the forefront of socially conscious. There's like 3 shops that opened up way in downtown by the beach, and they're all on this sustainable movement. Burke Mercantile, Bring Your Own Long Beach, and 3 Women, which is upcycled and vintage. And we're doing upcycled and vintage here also. We're calling it pre-loved clothing. So they support us, we support them, so that we all are all doing global good. So that's the bonus.
Yeah, I think finding other retailers like that is really good. That's part of your stakeholders. I was just going to ask you, Teresa, how do you run the store? Is it a cooperative, or is it like its own separate business entity with staff and everything?
We copied the business model of the Long Beach Business Journal, highlighted 3 businesses in Long Beach that are opening up collectives. So we're a collective, but we want to call ourselves partners. And we do have me and as a full-time volunteer right now. We have that volunteer background spirit with 10,000 Villages. And I just call it my office space for the day when I'm here. We're closed on Mondays. I'm here right now. We want to learn organically how this can grow into more of a cooperative, because that's the business model we had in mind. We are very closely aligned with the Long Beach Grocery Cooperative that is getting ready to open their brick and mortar, and they put fair trade in their principles. So when we align on events and stuff, we were at the Music Taste Good Festival with Janelle Monáe, with the tent right by the stage with the co-op and us, with like our fair trade campaign bags on, our stickers and all of that. So we're growing, we're organic. Our grand opening was on World Fair Trade Day. Just Coffee Cooperative made us our own coffee brand. We have Fair Trade Long Beach coffee. And the Matt flew out from Madison, Wisconsin to debut that. So know that these connections you're making, like me from New York to Alexandria, Virginia to Pasadena, this becomes a small world, right, everybody?
Thanks so much for sharing that, Teresa. Wow, you definitely, I mean, I feel like I'm always enthusiastic about fair trade, but that really gave me an extra boost this evening. So thank you for that. Does anybody else have any questions that they want to bring up to the speakers or to Teresa now? Anything at all? No? All right, well, maybe Emily, if you're still on the call from media, I would love it if you could maybe talk a little bit about partnerships with the Media Fair Trade campaign and retailers in media. Everybody on the call, media was the first fair trade campaign, town campaign in the United States. So Emily, we would love to hear from you a little bit if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so in media, we're pretty lucky. We have a couple different stores that do fair trade. We do have a 10,000 Villages location, and that's actually how I personally got into the whole fair trade thing. Was I volunteered first at the 10,000 Villages store and eventually was an assistant manager there before moving on to other things. But that's how I became involved with the campaign and media. They were already declared a fair trade town by the time I became involved, but I've been with them now for probably like 9 years. So we have our 10,000 Villages that we work closely with. And we also have, let me think, we have 2 other retail stores in town that do a fair amount of fair trade products. We have one store called Kuda that also does like jewelry and clothing and bags, as well as local stuff. And there's another store called Earth and State who does like fair trade chocolate, a lot of the fair trade handicrafts, things like that, as well as mixing with local artisans. And the owner of that store, Drew, has been a member of the Fair Trade Committee in Media for, actually, he's probably been there since the beginning. So we're always partnering with him. It works out really great. One of the most recent things we did a partnership with the elementary school, which is a fair trade school. We were
Hello.
in doing.
Hi. Nothing much.
We were.
I am not in the basement, no.
Just a reminder to mute yourself if you're.
Oh, I'm in the office.
Oh, that's fine. Okay. I'm wrapping up. I'm trying to.
Can't tell. Go ahead and mute yourself if you're not talking or asking a question, so we can eliminate some of that background noise. Okay, you want to go ahead, Emily?
Elementary school doing Can everybody hear me okay? I'm sorry, I keep getting like muted messages.
Yeah, now we can. I think somebody else wasn't muted, so it was kind of overlapping each other, but go back to Media Elementary School if you could start
Okay.
from there. Thank you.
Sure. So our elementary school right in our town is a fair trade school, and we often go in and do a little fun fair trade cocoa farmer like lesson role play with them. And having the partnership with Drew at the Earth and State store is really nice, because one of the things that we gave to the students as part of the presentation was a little coupon for the little like snack bar size Divine chocolate. So each of the kids who participated in the lesson got one of these coupons that then they could take to Earth and State and redeem for a bar of fair trade chocolate. So it kind of kept it in the kids' minds. They could go to this cool store, get some chocolate. Drew is an excellent fair trade ambassador. We kind of call him the unofficial mayor of media. Like literally, if you've been to media, you have probably met Drew. He's a fantastic guy. So he can kind of further that talk with the kids about fair trade, about what they learned. And the kids are obviously coming in with their parents. So then the parents can sort of hear a little bit about what fair trade is, what this thing was that their kids did in school. So it's really this like mutually beneficial relationship. You know, we get to reach out to more people about the message of fair trade and the benefits of fair trade, but it's also actually bringing business to the local shops as well. And I do want to also comment on, I'm sorry, I missed her name, the comments earlier about piggybacking on events that are already happening. This is like something that we learned early on and we swear by. Very often we're piggybacking on other events that are happening in our town. We're really lucky that media almost always has something going on. At the end of, actually next week on Wednesday, we're going to be out. Our town has a lot of restaurants, and every summer they have an event that they call Dining Under the Stars, where all throughout the summer on Wednesday nights, all of the restaurants bring all of their tables and chairs out onto our main shopping street. The street's closed to traffic, and everybody dines al fresco. So we're going to be out on the street holding a fair trade soccer ball juggling contest. Where we'll be giving out little prizes like chocolates, and actually we have a whole bunch of fair trade soccer balls that we're going to be giving away. And we are partnering with that with our local high school, which also happens to be a fair trade high school. The varsity soccer team is going to be out with us with their soccer balls, and they're going to be like helping little kids learn how to like foot juggle soccer balls and helping count how many juggles can people do. So that's going to be really fun. And we were just also setting up details for right before Halloween. We're going to be at our local farmers market so we can talk about fair trade chocolate around Halloween and fair trade candy and things like that. So partnering with anybody and anybody you can and piggybacking on any events that are going on in your town definitely is the way to go. Like no need to reinvent the wheel. Partnerships are where it's at.
Thanks so much for that, Emily. I love that idea, the dining under the stars. I think I need to go push that to my community. But yeah, I think it's really important to remember too, with the whole piggybacking, fair trade fits into so many different aspects of community life. Like there are so many different things that it relates to. So definitely keep an eye out for those things in your town and join on if you can. So you've got about 5 more minutes. Did anybody have a last minute question that they would like to ask or comment? If you want to just share about where your town campaign is at, or if you're having a problem that you don't know how to solve, I think we'd all be happy to share our input and help with that.
Hi everyone, this is Rachel from Fair Trade Philadelphia, and I thought I would just share a quick story about a success of ours recently, piggybacking off of what Alissa said about, using the stores as a meeting place. We had a fair trade fashion show at our local 10,000 Villages here in Philadelphia. That was really nice. And they had donated all the clothing for the event, and we held it in their space after hours. And it was, I think that was one of the key events in getting some folks outside of our normal network in, and then they also had the added benefit of, you know, viewing the beautiful store as well.
Thanks so much for sharing. That's awesome.
I'm wondering before we close if Alissa and Cassidy or anyone else who's had success teaming up with a local retail outlet, if you have just like your top line tip on how do you start that conversation if you're an organizer that's found success creating that partnership, or from the retail perspective, like what is the value that you look for if someone's coming in the door saying, hey, I'm working on this project in my community, we want to team up with you. What is the value that you would look for to say yes to that partnership, just to give people some tips to walk away with here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that anybody who, I mean, any kind of promotion or outreach that you can do is worthwhile if you have the resources to do them. So that's just one thing to think about. I mean, there are some things that we haven't done here because I haven't felt that we had the resources to, for example, we have this huge event called ComFest. It's a great event, and Global Gifts does have a booth and bins at this event, but it's 3 days. It's like 11 to 11. And Fair Trade Columbus could probably get its own booth, and it would be volunteer run, but staffing that would be so difficult. So we've never done it. Instead, we just used the Global Gifts booth to put the Fair Trade Columbus stuff out there. So I think that those are just the things you have to balance. And when I'm talking to somebody, like if I want to reach out to somebody, I look for common ground. And that's, if there's a common ground there, like I think Teresa was talking about, there was a local retailer that did reused clothing, you know, people that are socially conscious. I think farmers markets are a great place. I mean, almost everybody has a farmers market. And with the focus on food, I think fair trade is just a natural common ground there. So that's what I would look for.
Yeah, and I would say we are, as a retailer, we're always interested in expanding our network. So, you know, anytime there's an opportunity that fits in with our mission or our vision, and we have the resources or the time to do it, we'll be interested. And so if there's you know, when people reach out to us, as long as we have the volunteer power, we usually are game. And I think that would go both ways, I suppose.
Great, thanks for that. That's sort of last bit. We've only got a minute left, so I guess at this point we'll just say thank you all so much for joining in on this call. Thank you especially to our speakers for chatting with us today about partnerships with fair trade retailers and fair trade towns campaigns. And I hope that all of you learned something today or can take away some information from this call that will help you further your campaign or gain some more momentum. Stay tuned for an email. It'll have this recording on it, I believe, and then it's just some notes from the call. If you didn't take any, or if you were maybe scribbling really fast, we'll have some good notes laid out for you so you can remember everything that you learned today. And I think that's all. So thank you all so much, and we hope to see you next time we have one of these town strategy calls.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.